Summer routines live or die by how easy they are, and honestly, if something takes too much effort, I'm out. That's why Groons is my go-to. It's my one daily pack of gummies covering my greens, vitamins, and minerals. Plus, it has 6 grams of prebiotic fiber, which is more than 2 cups of broccoli. No mixing powders, no giant pills, no hassle. I just rip open the pack and I'm done. They taste good and they make it easy to stay on top of my health, even when life gets busy. Save up to 52% with the code PODCAST at Groons.co. That's code PODCAST at GRUNS.co.
The Dialed In Angling Podcast presented by OnX Fish, Arneson's Rocky Point Resort, Strike Master, and 13 Fishing. Well, this week I am out in the Ottertail County area. I'm actually fishing Lake Ottertail this week. We've got Lundmania. You know, last week, if you listen to the podcast, I was up on Leech Lake doing the Lund Camp. Now, this is Lundmania. It's actually a Lund Owners Tournament on Lake Ottertail. You know, if you look back in our podcast history last year, I did an interview about Lundmania. This year, once again, I'm fishing it with my son. I'm staying with some friends. I love the Ottertail area. It is one of those gems in Minnesota where there's thousands of lakes. There's literally 1,000 lakes in the county, in Ottertail County. I love coming out here because there's so many great lakes. Whether you like fishing panfish, walleyes, pike, bass, all of the above, Ottertail County has a lake for you. And I love this area. I think, you know, I say it all the time in the podcast that, you know, we're blessed to have all these resources in Minnesota, but we are blessed to have Ottertail County in Minnesota. It's just one of those gems. You know, I filmed Dialed In Angling out here in the winter. We did some stuff. I plan on doing some more in the future. Love being out here in the summer. As a matter of fact, my guest is no stranger to this podcast. He's frequently on giving fishing reports, but we want to chat with Randin Olson. Welcome to the podcast, bud.
Hey, it's going to be a good time. Happy to be on here.
You know, I love having you on because obviously you're a wealth of knowledge when it comes to this area, but you're a great stick wherever you go. I know you've been fishing a lot of tournaments. But I wanted to talk about Ottertail County. You know, the last time we had you on as a guest on the podcast, we were sitting in my ice house. We had just got done filming Dialed In Angling. I have you frequently on the podcast, the fishing reports section. And I know that I field a lot of questions people ask, you know, what's Randin up to, you know, so I know that people that are listening in, but let's catch up in person. You know, you've been on the water every single day. We're past the 4th of July. It's hard to believe summer's flying by, as it always does in Minnesota, right? Or in the upper Midwest. How's the season been going for you?
It's been really good. You know, weather's not been bad. I enjoy those cooler springs. I always like that stuff. It seems like the fish kind of hold their patterns a little longer, so that's always nice. But no, the weather's been great. The season's been awesome. It seems like the fish have been willing no matter where we go, which is really good for me because I like to jump around a lot. You know, you said it, there's 1,048 lakes here. My goal is to hit everyone before I'm not here anymore. So.
Oh, I thought you meant in this season.
Yeah.
I'm just teasing you.
But no, it's been super fun. And everything's been fairly cooperative and kind of in their normal places. So jumping around from lake to lake's been pretty cool.
You know, I'm like you. I like the cooler spring. I think it's the jig fisherman in me that kind of likes that extended spring. The last few springs, if you look back, it seems like, you know, we go from ice to summer. You know, it just heats up super quickly. And this year was a little more normal. It was obviously below normal, actually, with the temperatures as far as how cool it was. The water temp stayed cool for a while. I like that. But even so, it went from cool to summer. You know, We had that great big leap once again. And you can't control Mother Nature, right? But if I had my choice, it would not be that. It would be more of just a steady increase in surface temperatures so you can get that jig bite longer. You can do a few more things.
Yep.
I like summer patterns. I like when the weeds come up and you know, I love all that as well. But I'm like you. I like spring and I like fall. You know, that's those two time periods that only come around, you know, in the spring and fall, and I take advantage of it. Now, as far as the fishing, I know you've been doing a ton of guiding. Has it been primarily walleye fishing, pan fishing, muskie fishing? I know you do a ton of muskie trips, all of the above.
A little bit of all the above. Walleyes kind of always get center stage, but we do a ton of crappie trips up here. And, you know, we get spoiled up here with our crappies. I know I am. We've got such a handful of lakes. The growth rates are so good that you'll go out there and, you know, 12.5 to 13.5 are pretty common. That's just a normal size crappie for around here. So 15s aren't out of the question in a lot of our lakes. So I'll get guys out from, you know, maybe cities or out of state, and we'll catch a 10.5. Like, now we're going to leave that alone. It's, you know,
right.
And we get naive to the fact that those fish aren't everywhere. So this truly is a special place as well. But the crappie bite's been awesome. They had a messed up spawn this year. So it was a really good pre-spawn, and then it fluttered out fairly quick. But the last week or so, we're starting to kind of see them come back again. That happened a few years ago as well. What we ended up noticing is they all still had their eggs. They just kind of, kind of sucked them up and never really dropped them. So kind of an interesting thing to watch happen throughout the season. But
I think I not only with the crappies, but we saw it with the bluegills. We had at the end of my dock, you know, the bluegills came in, males started making beds, and then I don't know if the females never came in. It just got cold, and that, you know, same thing with the crappies, like you said. We noticed that as well. Is like the females, that pre-spawn bite was incredible, and I fish from basically where I live to Leech Lake. You know, that's kind of my realm. And same thing. It was like they got ready to go, and then nothing happened. And so it'll be interesting. Obviously, panfish can be prolific spawners, but you don't want to see too many of these years where you have gaps like this, because, you know, that can raise havoc, obviously, and especially with smaller bodies of water where you have huge gaps in year classes.
Yeah. Yeah, and everything else is kicked up. The smallie fishing in Ottertail County has gotten great. And it's, I don't know, couple dozen lakes that got them. Size has been great. Quantity's been great. It's just everything loves this cooler water temp, and I wish it would stay like that all year.
Yeah. What I noticed just fishing Lundmania, you know, coming out to Ottertail fishing over even the last 5 years, the steady increase of not only the smallmouth population, but the size of the smallmouth. You know, you come to Lake Ottertail, like we're fishing right now. We were talking off air before we jumped on. I can't believe the amount of smallmouth out here and the numbers and the size. You know, last year, Robbie and I, when we were pre-fishing, I mean, we stopped for like an hour and just caught smallmouth one after another. And they were all really good quality size smallmouth up to like 20 inches. And then this year, I've caught 2 already that are over 20. I didn't measure them, but I mean, I'm a pretty good judge when it comes to smallmouth. Yeah. And the first one I caught, I'm like, look at this one, Robbie. I'm guessing it was 21 incher, you know, and it's really cool to see. I love that. I know a lot of lakes that get zebra mussels, you know, everybody's like, oh no, we got zebra mussels. And yes, I hate the fact that we have zebra mussels. I hate the fact that we have invasive species, but they're here. And because they're here, there's certain species that are going to flourish as a result of it. And smallmouth bass are one of them.
Yep. Nope. 100% agree. You know, that was a really scary thing when those things first kind of got into our lakes. And I'm with you. I'm not saying they're good for a lake. We need to keep them out, keep them gone. But it's changed our fisheries a lot. And I can't say it's for the worse yet. The walleye fishing out here has just exploded. The size has gotten better. You know, Ottertail used to always be known as 10, 11, 12 inch little cigar walleyes. And now it's nothing to go out here and you know, get limits of 17, 18s, catch a 25, catch a 26. So, the fisheries really exploded well. And I know you've been out here for one day, but the amount of walleyes in this lake is just sheerly mind boggling. You start to kind of see those pods of those 12, 13, 14, 15 inchers, and there's hundreds of them. It's, sometimes you drive by them, you just think they're crappies. I mean, you know, it just looks like that big of a school. So it's pretty cool to see that.
Yeah. I mean, I've only been out here for one day here, but unbelievable amount of fish as far as pods of fish, and you get in there, and I know we're pre-fishing for a tournament. So it's like those big pods aren't exactly what we're targeting, but you can't help but not cast to them, especially on forward facing. I told Robbie there was a stretch where we got in between, I would say, two bigger clumps of cabbage, right, that were maybe 80 feet apart. And I'm like, look at Robbie, they're all walleyes. They look like you said, panfish, bluegills, whatever. No, they're walleyes. The amount of fish in this lake is insane. And the fact that they've gotten bigger, a lot of these I would say are that 13 to 15 inch range, just, a really good, crazy good year class of fish. And they're all over the lake. I mean, everywhere I went anyway, I haven't even scratched the surface of this lake yet. And still I'm seeing these giant pods of walleyes all over the place.
Yeah, it's a really cool fishery. The other cool thing is you can kind of do whatever you want. There's a ton of different patterns going on right now. You can go up shallow and catch fish. You can go deep. You can go in the weeds. You can go in the sand, the rocks. They're all kind of holding fish, and that's the beauty of it. You're not stuck to any one kind of presentation. If you feel like doing something different one day, you might have to go to a different couple areas, but you'll find fish that'll go on it. So.
Yeah, the walleyes out here relate to a lot of different things, and there's tons of different structure. And it's crazy how you'll be on one hump and it's just completely naked of any sort of vegetation or whatever, and there's walleyes. You go to the next set of structure and it's all tall cabbage weeds and it's like a forest, and there's walleyes. And you go to the next spot, so on and so forth. You have tight breaks, sharp breaks. Like you said, basin areas, there's walleyes out there. It's like there's no lack of fish anywhere you go in the lake, and there's definitely no lack of bait fish out here. Let's talk a little bit about the sturgeon. I know just seeing them out here is pretty impressive. I know you'd have to kind of let our listeners know. I'm not sure how long they've been in here. I know they got reintroduced in the last couple decades. But the amount of sturgeon I see on my scope, I don't know that I see this many on Lake of the Woods when I'm fishing, or on the Rainy River even in the spring. It's
truly incredible how fast those things have kind of come up in this lake. 1999, nobody ever heard of a sturgeon out here. You just didn't. 2000 was kind of the year they started the stocking program, and they've just flourished. If you're ever around here in the spring, in that early May time period, stop at one of the rivers that you'll cross and you'll see hundreds of them in the stream spawning, doing their stuff. It's really cool to see, but we've been targeting them now the last couple of years, and it's been really fun to kind of figure it out. Like we were saying, there's not really a how-to catch them on a lake. You can find a little bit of info on rivers and stuff, but a lake, you just kind of got to figure it out. So, the last about year and a half, we've kind of gotten into some successful kind of patterns that seem to be holding up. And they keep working. We keep trying them. They're always for walleye trips, because the way the walleye fishing's been out here, we might have a couple hours to go do something fun. So we go chase a sturgeon around. It's quickly becoming one of my favorite things to catch. It's just a very interesting fish. You hook that thing with, full on musky gear, and you're still in for a 20-minute fight. And it's everything you got to hang on to them.
Yeah, they're so powerful.
Yeah, and they're getting really big. 4th of July, just recently, we took a family out to watch fireworks on the lake, and we caught a 61-incher while we were sitting there doing that. So there's a lot of those kind of 50 to 55-inch fish out here. It's really cool. Unless you're in a walleye tournament cruising around scoping, it gets a little frustrating. You see a lot of them 2, 3, 4 footers, look just enough like a walleye
until they turn profile.
Yep.
It's like if they're face head on, those smaller ones, you're like, oh, there's one sitting there. I told Robbie about 10 different times. I'm like, nope, sturgeon. Even if you catch a little bit of that tail section, you see that tail wobble.
Yep.
It's really cool to see. As a guide, though, that's intriguing to me that you're targeting them now, where, as you move forward, if you've never sturgeon fished, really it was always just a Rainy River thing. But now with this fishery coming on, I've told a lot of people, I don't know why there's not more guides starting to target them. And it's good to hear that you're going after them. I know for me, I love catching sturgeon. I love catching them in the spring. they fight like crazy. People ask me and they're like, how would you rank sturgeon against muskies, as far as how they fight, right? And it's like, sturgeon have so much muscle. It's like, if they want to go somewhere, they just go.
Yep.
And you can't tighten down your drag enough to stop that thing.
No.
It's just amazing how powerful they are. They're not big runners. They don't take big hard runs. They just go. It's sort of like a diesel pickup truck versus a gasoline motor.
Yeah, those muskies, I always related those big muskies to just a big log. They'll just lay there and shake their head. Yep. They're good at that. Use their body weight and make you pull them in, basically. But those sturgeon, man, and the bite is the most incredible part. It's not, you see this big giant fish that's 50, 60, 70 pounds, and you think it's going to be this big hard bite and run, and it's just a little bluegill tap.
Yeah,
that's all you get is a couple of bluegill taps, and you just start reeling with those circle hooks, and that rod just doesn't stop bending. And man, I can't tell you how many times that one fish will have 4 people reeling it in.
Oh, sure. Especially families.
Yep. And the things jump. That's the other great part, hook all the walleyes you want. They're amazing. They're fun, but they're not going to jump out of the water. So watching this 50-pound fish come flying out of the water and your line's attached to it is pretty fun. Pretty cool.
Okay. So we've covered panfish, we've covered sturgeon, we've covered walleyes. What about muskies? How are the muskies been? Are things heating up for you as we get towards the 4th of July? I mean, what's your favorite time of year to target muskies in Ottertail County?
June and July are my favorite months to kind of cover muskies. And this has been a little weirder year with that cooler spring. Fish have been kind of a little different this year, but the last about 2.5 weeks, we've starting to see a lot more fish running around, a little more like normal. But now we're starting to creep into that time where it's almost too hot. I've seen a few lakes now kind of touching that 75, 76 range. I know for me, I don't like anything about 76 or heavier or hotter. I usually like to let them be. It just gets too stressful for them, but it's getting really good. These kind of hot, muggy days are always good for muskies, especially early in the season. It just kind of seems to get them rolling. So looking like a really good year. The fish are in predictable locations. It's just like muskies always are. It's just timing and gotta be at the right spot at the right time.
Always. Muskies, to me, that when I first started guiding, I was just more walleye fisherman, but then I went up to Lake of the Woods and I fell in love with muskie fishing. And so then coming back down to Mille Lacs Lake, at that time, Mille Lacs was full of muskies. And so I spent a really good deal of time chasing after them just because I wanted to guide for muskies on top of walleyes. And what I realized for me personally is that I didn't have the patience level to take people muskie fishing. I could, when I got done guiding walleyes, I could go out on my own and fish muskies till I was, dead tired. But as far as taking people out muskie fishing, it was a real challenge. Now, having said that, the older I've gotten, because there was a big chunk of period of my life, of my guide life, where I just would not take people out muskie guiding. I just couldn't do it, But now that I've gotten older, maybe just a little more patient, I'm a lot more patient with a lot of aspects of my life. But now I've taken a few more customers where I really know them, and they're like, hey, we want to try to catch a muskie or a big pike on Mille Lacs. I'm a lot more chill. And I think maybe with live scope too, it's like, it helps a little bit as far as, I like tracking fish down shallow. I don't like doing the deep water deal. Yep. I just refuse to do it. But tracking fish down shallow and really just casting for them. And when I do muskie trips, I don't run fish down with the scope. It's more like covering water. But I think with the scope, it gives me a little more confidence that if they're not casting perfectly, we can go hit a bunch of spots and we have a good chance of at least seeing quite a few fish, if not catching one.
Yeah, it's when I first started doing muskies, actually when I first started guiding, that's all I wanted to do was muskies. That's always kind of been my big favorite fish, I suppose. But I was always brutally honest with people to the point that I probably turned a lot of people away from doing a muskie trip. Just because I was always worried about that. I know how hard it was, and I had fished them for so long. So, I always say, my goal when I take somebody out is to get you one bite. That's my goal. Hopefully we see, 5, 6, 7, 8 fish, but we're trying to get one bite. And thankfully I had enough awesome clients that gave me a shot to do it and had the patience, and it's turned out to be really awesome. It's one of my favorite things to do. It's just, I think I get more excited than the clients do sometimes. It's just figuring it out, teaching this person how to do it quickly within a few hours and then watching them succeed at it. And I think that's probably why we all guide anyway, That's the glory of it. So
especially now, I mean, the older I get, the more I enjoy fishing with customers that I fished with for a long time. But I also enjoy the teaching aspect of it. And I probably always have. But when I was younger, I was like, I wanted to catch fish. I wanted to get the live well full of fish. I wanted to, people to have a good time. If I had a really tough day on the water, man, it bothered me a lot, and it still does. Like when I have a tough day, like we just experienced some really big bug hatches on Leech Lake, Mille Lacs, Winnie. On the onset of the bug hatch, it was good. But Leech Lake, it was like a 10-day ordeal, and the bite got super tough. Even at Lund camp there, we ended up going to fish a bunch of different lakes. It just, when it gets tough like that, I usually, and you know how it is in the winter too, winter ice guiding. If you have a tough day on the water, especially if it's been backed up by like really good days, bookend on with good days on either end, you get a tough day in the middle. Like it still affects me, but not as bad as it did when I first started guiding,
Yep.
And so going back to the muskie thing, like if I had a day, like I just remember taking this son and his dad out. They came every single year, right? And they'd come right after the 4th of July. And they always wanted to do like the combo trip, which that's extremely hard to do.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, the other thing is really hard to do is like putting a trip on a calendar where you're only going to fish 1 or 2 days and saying, okay, we're going to do a combo trip. Oh, and by the way, we want to boat a muskie. Well, I think one of the first years I took them out fishing, we did. We had really good success. We got a bunch of walleyes, got a bunch of smallmouth bass, and they boated a muskie. So then it was like, okay, next year we're going to do the same thing. And it just doesn't always work out like that. But I just remember like there was like, same type of deal that we had this year. Was like right after the 4th, they came, huge bug hatch, right? So the walleye bite was tough. When smallmouth bass fishing, that was our saving grace. Ended up catching some on top water, but if it was windy, that bite wasn't there. And then we tried to muskie fish and it wasn't there because, I don't know, the bugs were hatching and all the ciscos were out and the muskies were gone. I'm not sure why, but it just was like, several years in a row, when that particular group came, we had a tough trip. And that always bothers me. Like, especially, it's one thing if you had one bad day.
Yep.
But if you have multiple bad days or a group that comes, it comes and, you have 2 years in a row with a bad trips. Oh my gosh, it drives me nuts,
That's a week, at least a week. I'll carry that with me. One bad day. It's just, that's the way I've always been with it. There's always in the back of my mind going, what the heck did I miss? Like what should I have done different? I will never forget. I had a guy out here, one of the toughest bites I'd ever seen. And we got one fish in 4 hours and I could not figure out what the heck I was missing. And we got back to the access and getting the things kind of cleaned up and ready and cleaning his fish up. And this guy pulls out and starts throwing a limit out of his boat into a bag.
That hurts.
And I'm just I looked at the guy and he looked at me and he's kind of got that, what the heck look, and I'm like, I don't know. It ain't from lack of trying. I was the nail today instead of the hammer.
Right. I've had it both ways. I've been in the fish cleaning shack where someone's cleaning one fish and I dump them out and vice versa. It's going to happen. You fish long enough, things are going to happen. Things don't go your way, whether it be, something breaks down in your boat or you're on a pattern and it's so strong that all of a sudden things change,
yep.
And that's what makes fishing fun. And that's what I love about doing what we do is the fact that I like figuring them out. Like you said, patterning fish. I'd say that's my favorite thing about fishing is figuring them out. Reeling them in to me, it's especially like walleyes and stuff. That's not it. It's figuring them out. So once I got them figured out, I'm fine. So, it's like the whole world's right. The universe is right.
Yep.
And so, if people are coming to Ottertail County, I don't want to take up any more of your time. We're going to take a quick break here in a second, Randin. But, if people are coming to Ottertail County, right now it's July. I know a lot of people equate July and August as the dog days. I don't think of that time period as the dog days. I know there's a reason why Randin doesn't target muskies in those temperatures because he doesn't want to hurt fish. But for me personally, I get so many people that say, well, I don't want to come up during the dog days. And I'm like, there's no dog days. I would say the dog days is when we have those mayfly hatches. After that, things you tend to improve. But if people are coming up here on vacation or you're guiding, what are some techniques you're going to be doing, let's say to target walleyes, panfish, bass, whatever, but just to have a successful trip on the water? I mean, areas of the lake you're going to be targeting, what are some things people can do? And I know it's tough because you got 1,000 lakes in this county, but if you're coming towards Ottertail, Rush, Big Pine, any of these, bigger bodies of water, kind of in the heart of where we're at in Lakes Country, what would some of your advice be to them?
Yeah, a big thing around here that seems to get lost on a lot of anglers is just speed. You get into July and August, those water temps get 76, 77, 78. We catch fish on Ottertail pulling cranks at 4.5 to 5 miles an hour in the summer through August. Those fish will crank up speed. You're covering 10 times more water than you are pulling a Lindy rig or something like that. And you're just, you're going after active fish. So the first thing I always tell people in those months is just find some good weeds, get somewhere near them, or either go over the top or down the edge of them somehow. And just get going, get up in that 3.5 to 4.5. And if you don't feel comfortable going 5, I get a lot of weird looks out in the lake going that fast, but it's cool. The fish love it. You catch a lot of fish doing it, but, get going fast, cover some water, and, that'll help you kind of put things together. And the big thing I see a lot of in July and August is guys get stuck. I like to call them sucker fish. You'll fish an area, catch a couple, go a little while with nothing, and you get ready to start kind of moving, and you'll usually catch one more. A lot of times it makes guys stay there for another hour, 2 hours. You don't get another bite. So kind of a sucker fish. Big thing for me in July and August, just keep moving. Don't get married to any one spot. You always want to say they're going to turn on, but more often than not in those months, they don't. So pull in, fish through an area quickly, get what you get, go to the next spot, do the same thing. And if you keep doing that, you'll have a really good bag throughout the end of the day.
Yeah, I like the multi-species trips in July and August too, where you might go out, catch a few walleyes in the morning, go target some bass and panfish in the weeds, sort of mixing it up. I get asked a lot too, like, hey, I'm vacationing on Lake X. What would you do? Like you said, trolling a shad wrap, throwing a spinner behind the boat with a split shot on it and a nightcrawler or a leech. I mean, just things like that, trolling, covering water, even power fishing where you're casting a plastic along a weed edge or whatever it may be, and snap jigging or jerk baits, but just power fishing where you're covering water quickly. I always tell people, if you're going on vacation, you're going to a destination location, pick the biggest point in the lake and just power fish that whole point. Whether it be power fishing by trolling, power fishing by casting, but covering that ground and covering that water, like you said, getting weird looks trolling 3.5, 4 miles an hour. Yes, people may think, what is this guy doing? But he's catching fish, and you're going to catch everything. You're going to catch bass, northern pike, whatever. If you've got a live scope unit, if you've got a unit of any sort of live sonar, just getting in those areas and just seeking out areas where you're seeing fish in the weeds or just off the edge and power fishing, you're going to do much better. Now, Randin, if someone needs to get a hold of you, wants to get a hold of you, I know you're probably pretty booked up for the summer, but how would they go about getting in contact with Randin Olson from Lockjaw Guide Service?
Yeah, absolute best way is just to give us a call at 218-640-0158. Otherwise, you can find us on our website at lockjawguideservice.com or even on Facebook as well. So we do all of our booking and stuff online. You can see all of our open dates and what we got left and available and all that stuff. So, but never hesitate to call or text.
Ottertail County has 1,048 lakes, and I think I've fished 8 or 9 of them. So I have quite a few more to go. So I plan on spending more time out here fishing with you, Randin. I appreciate you jumping on the podcast. I know you're pre-fishing for Lundmania like we are. You got a ton of stuff going on. So I appreciate you carving out a little bit of time. We're actually sitting at the public ramp in my truck recording a podcast right now. So thanks a lot. My my friend. Good luck in the tournament. We'll check in with you all the rest of the summer too. I really appreciate all of your input when it comes to fishing reports for our listeners. I know that's a big part of our podcast, and it has been for Dialed In Angling. So thanks again. Good luck fishing. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, man. Well, hopefully you're third right behind me.
Hey, I'd be fine with that. All right, stay tuned. We got more Dialed In Angling after this. We're going to talk more about Ottertail County, the history of Ottertail County, some of the resorts. A good friend of mine, Phil Jensen, that I stay with, he grew up in Battle Lake. His grandparents had a resort on this lake, on Ottertail Lake. I want to get some insight from him. We'll talk more about Lundmania. Stay tuned. We got more Dialed In Angling after this. Arneson's Rocky Point Resort in northern Minnesota offers a little something for everyone. Nestled on Lake of the Woods South Shore, it provides easy access to 14 remarkable reefs. Serious anglers know that Arneson's offers some of the best fishing, charter fishing, and small boat fishing options, all supported by the largest protected marina on the lake's South Shore. Accommodation selections range from 1 to 5 bedrooms. Equipped with all the modern conveniences, guests can enjoy a delightful dining experience and stunning lake views at the Rock Harbor Lodge, an on-site full-service bar and restaurant. The two beaches provide hours of fun for the whole family. Whether you're seeking an idyllic fishing spot or a relaxing vacation, Arneson's Rocky Point has everything you need. Check them out at arnesonsresort.com. Okay, so my next guest is Phil Jensen of PT Guide Service. Phil's been a longtime friend of mine. Matter of fact, Phil and I have known Phil since the 3rd grade. He was my football coach, gym teacher in 3rd grade. We met a long time ago. He used to fish tournaments with my dad. We have been very good friends for a long time. Phil, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me, Tony. It's great to be here.
Yeah, as we sit in Ottertail here, I was just talking with Randin before you jumped on about how blessed you are to live in this area. Not only is it just rich with lakes, but it's also rich with history when it comes to fishing. I know being at your house, seeing all the old pictures of your dad, all the old motors that he worked on, you talking about your grandparents and their resort and just sort of that rich fishing history. I love that stuff. I grew up with that. As you know, my family, deep into fishing, but also that fishing history. I used to love going through, old tackle boxes and old lures and all that stuff. I love old rods, old boats, and seeing all the stuff that you have at your house, the things that your dad, Virgil, restored. I always had a great appreciation for that. And, just that rich fishing history.
Yeah, I always said I don't know any better, but I can't imagine a better place to grow up than right here in the Ottertail Lakes area. My grandfather came to Ottertail Lake for the very first time in 1917 for an opener. And between him, my dad, and myself, we haven't missed an opener since. So we got a long line of history on the lake, and it's just interesting to see how things have changed. I look back, my grandpa used to troll around with a 3 or 4 foot steel rod with the great big old bead chain sinkers and spinners, and and to the finesse fishing that we need to do today is just totally different.
I know. It seems like you can't fathom. I always say I would love to have a live scope back then to see what the lake looked like versus now. Obviously the crude presentations and the way they trolled. I mean, as technology got better, so did the anglers as far as how finessey we had to get and line species and everything. I mean, you look at, like you said, the old steel rods and reels and the braided line, and they caught fish.
Oh, they caught it. Yeah, a lot of fish and big fish. I got the one picture on the wall of my grandpa with 7 walleyes on a metal rod there, and I've always tried to figure out their size, and I measured my fist and kind of went against his fist. And like the smallest one is like 30 inches. I mean, they're just big fish they caught back then. And but they also took care of the lake. My dad and grandpa always talked about the rearing ponds that they would run long before the DNR did anything. They would raise walleyes in the ponds and take them out and put them in the lake, and they just wouldn't dump them in the lake. They'd actually take them out and put them on some of the different structure that they knew about. And of course, to know about the structure back then means they found it with a cane pole.
Yeah.
There were no electronics at all. And you line things up with a certain tree or a certain cabin, and that's how they found it.
What was the water clarity when you were a kid versus now? I mean, I'm not talking just with the onset of zebra mussels, but what did the lake look like? Has it always been this clear, or did it have a certain tone or color to it?
Ottertail's always been a pretty clear lake, obviously a good sand bottom throughout. I mean, very, very little mud out here. We would get the algae blooms that, like you typically see in the summer. So it would start to turn color then, but typically it's a good clear lake. And then now, obviously, with the onset of the zebra mussels, and it's really clear now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you go out here, it's amazing. I haven't been out here in the spring, but even just being out here in July where there's a little bit of algae in the water. The other day it was dead flat calm, and you could see down 8-9 feet, no problem. You could see walleye swimming around. Has it always been like that?
No, not always been that clear. Like now, even in the spring of the year, we can be out in that 18-20 feet of water and see the fish. But then, as the spring progresses and you get a little more runoff and the algae blooms and stuff, then it starts to dirty up a little bit. But yeah, even going back, usually in that 10 to 12 feet, you could still see bottom pretty good.
Okay. Yeah, it's a awesome lake, interesting lake, tons of structure. I always think back to like when the old guys went out and found spots, how they found spots, like you said, with cane poles, or, I know guys that would use, just big heavy weights, like a big lead weight, sort of like a dropper, like you'd use in the winter, to a depth bomb type of thing to measure depths. What are sort of some of the things that your dad did to find fish, and then obviously passed on to you? Because I know your dad Virgil spent a ton of time out here, prior to, let's say, even mapping technology. It seemed like a lot of those guys had it mapped in their head.
He did too. It was amazing because once the electronics came and the mapping came, we'd be out in the boat together, and he'd say, if you follow this down just a little bit farther, it's going to make a little inside turn, and then it's going to make a really hard turn back to the north, or whatever it was. They had to do that, though, because otherwise they would spend so much time off of structure that they really paid attention to the shoreline landmarks.
Yeah, the sort of, triangulation. I mean, I even had a little bit of that growing up, where it was like a compass heading and then a flasher. I remember my dad on Mille Lacs Lake, he'd head out to a compass heading and a flasher, but, it quickly escalated into Loran, then GPS, and, some people, they've never had to experience that. I mean, look at my son, Robbie. He's always had a map chip. He's always, for the most part, he's had a live scope. And so he never had to go out and find that structure. And even me as a kid, I was always like mentally mapping things. And I just wonder if people that start fishing today, not at like a rip on them or anything, but do they have that in their head where they're constantly like thinking about the map? I don't know if that's the case or not.
I think the anglers today take the map too much for granted and don't always take a look at what's happening underneath them and really reading their electronics, in terms of even the bottom composition, is it going from hard to soft right here, or those kind of little things, where the old timers, they had to do that, and even when the first flashers came out, they could still read hard bottom and soft bottom on them. It maybe took them a little while to figure it out, but and they banked all of that stuff in their head because, again, they didn't want to waste time. And you also got to remember back then, I can remember as a kid, we had a 10-horse motor.
Right.
16-foot wood boat out here on Ottertail, and you didn't run across the lake. We're now we run across from end to end 2-3 times in a day if we're, looking for a certain piece of structure or certain kind of bite. So they weren't able to do that.
Yeah, you forget about that aspect of just like the boat, motor, trailer. Everybody always talks about the electronics, how the electronics have improved. But you look at boat technology, how much it's improved. Just in our lifetimes, it's pretty incredible. I mean, even today we saw a guy out there in what I would consider a small boat, but back then would have been
a big boat.
Yeah, a ship,
Yeah.
I mean, it was like a 17-footer with a 20 horse. That would have been a really big boat back then.
Yeah, it would have. Yeah. I mean, it's crazy because like I say, 10-horse motors were big. A lot of people had 5.5, the old 5.5 Johnsons. That was a real popular motor.
When you were growing up, like when you were a young kid and let's say your grandparents had the resort, did they rent boats or rent motor? I mean, how did that work? Do you remember?
They did both. Yep. You could rent a boat with oars, and then it was more if you wanted a motor, but it was really cheap, I mean, well, it was still probably good money back in those days, but in terms of in dollars today, it would have been cheap, but maybe $5 for a motor for the day, something like that. But yeah, they rented boats, they rented motors. My grandpa and dad both guided out of the resort.
A guide told me one time when I first started guiding, there obviously it was a GPS era and then the onset of maps and stuff. And, the old timers hated the GPS, hated the spots because a lot of spots got exposed. But I just remember one guy told me, he's like, people used to fish in an area of the lake and they'd stay to that area of the lake. They wouldn't jump around. And I sort of took offense to it because I was like, I'm going to fish wherever I want because I had a big boat, But to put it into perspective, like you just brought up, and I started thinking about it more. Yeah, they did because they couldn't get to those other areas. So those guides or people that own that resort, they'd sort of stick to that area summer and winter. And, the next resort down the lake, they kind of stick to that area summer and winter. And they all kind of had their own zones. Well, now it seems like with technology that we have in the winter, the technology we have in the summer, we kind of fish everywhere. And it's just sort of the norm. Back then it wasn't. And, I didn't take offense to it to his face. I just was thinking, I was like, gosh, what do I care? But it makes sense to me now.
It does, yeah. And I think that's one of the ways that back then they learned the lake that much better, or that, like you say, that zone, that area, and basically in front of their cabin or in front of their resorts, they learned that area so well. And I think that goes back to what we talked about a few minutes ago. They had that map built in their head because those were the areas they fished, and they couldn't get anywhere else. Even if you put a boat on a trailer or in the back of a pickup, that was a big deal to go around. Ottertail's 12 miles long or whatever. I mean, that back in that day, that was a big trip.
Is there, I know like all over the Midwest, but all over Minnesota in particular, there's a lot of the family resorts that have gone away just because real estate has gotten so high on the lakes. You look all around Ottertail. I mean, some of the houses are absolutely beautiful. But at one point, there was a lot of resorts on the lake, right? I mean, how many resorts in total?
Oh, boy, I bet at one time there was easily over 20 resorts just on Ottertail Lake. And I think we're down to 4 right now, probably.
Yeah,
maybe 5.
And across the board, you look at all sorts of lakes across Minnesota. It's like that, where the family resorts sort of going away. The resorts you and I grew up going to, I love you, and I still go to as many resorts as I can all over the Midwest. But I love going to like the family resort, like the original family resort. Nothing against like the big guys that have knocked all over the houses and put up these beautiful condos and all this stuff. But I like the old school family resort like your grandparents had.
Yeah. There's something about that, and they all had that lodge feeling to them, that cozy feeling of pine interiors, and they were lucky if they had a propane heater. Most of them still even had wood heat in a lot of them, but yeah, just and family run, family oriented, slower pace of life.
Right, where you got to really know how to do everything. I remember when I got into guiding, I thought about buying a resort. And I remember talking to an old resorter, and he was like, hey, you love to fish, right? And I said, I love it. That's why I want to buy a resort. He's like, exactly why you don't want to buy a resort. He said, if you own a resort, all you're going to be doing is working at the resort. You will not be fishing. You'll be looking at all the out at the lake, and you'll be looking at all the people that are enjoying the lake, but you will not be fishing.
It's funny you say that, Tony, because I had this exact same feeling when I was a kid, is that I wanted to run a resort. And my dad told me the exact same thing. He says, no, you don't. He says, you like to fish too much. And there's a lot of truth to that. I know some of the resort owners here on the lake, and Trevor over here at Vacation Land, for example, he doesn't get out much. He finally gets to do some fishing in the fall and things like that, or he almost feels guilty if he takes off in an evening to go out for a couple hours because he's got guests and those are his priority, and he needs to take care of them.
Yeah. We talked how the fishing changed, from then to now. We talked a little bit with Randin Olson about the bite, as we get into July and August. I know you do a ton of guiding, not just on Ottertail, but all sorts of lakes around here. How has the fishing been for you this summer? And then as we get into, sort of what a lot of people would classify the dog days of summer, how do you change your approach to fishing? I know for me, it seemed like the dog days of summer were a thing of the past, whereas now it seems like you just have to fish a little bit differently.
I think that many, many years ago, somebody told me, an old-timer fisherman said, you know what? Those fish are just like you and I. We need to eat, and they need to eat. So they're biting somewhere on something all the time. We, as anglers and guides, we just got to figure that out. And we all know kind of the seasonal transitions that happen. For me, one of the things that I do probably a little bit more, especially with clients as the summer progresses, is switch over to either inline spinners or bottom bouncers with a slow death.
Sure. Yeah, just fish a little bit differently off the weed lines. Everybody has their go-to. I know we're in prime vacation time period from the 4th of July until the kids go back to school. There's a ton of fishing to do in this area, not just Ottertail Lake, but there's a ton of rich history too. If you look around here, whether it's you're at these restaurants, you look at the old pictures, just everything around this area, that it's a steep tradition of fishing in this area. It's so cool. If people that are listening haven't been to the Ottertail area or even just Ottertail County, the 1,000 lakes to choose from, it's definitely should be on your radar for the future.
And sometimes the big lakes around here, the Ottertail, the Big Pine, West Battle, some of those are the only lakes that people focus on. There is some really good gems around here in the smaller lakes, panfish, crappies, bass, and there's some other really good walleye lakes right around here too.
Yeah, my son and I, Robbie quite well. We love exploring new lakes. It doesn't matter if it's a big lake like Ottertail like this, or if it's a really small little lake. We just like discovering different bodies of water and the different potential that they have. So when we hit these smaller bodies of water, we're always geared up. We've got panfish rods, we've got walleye rods, we've got pike gear, bass gear, smallmouth bass. The smallmouth bass have really taken off in a lot of different areas. So we're always ready for whatever. Last summer in August, we took 10 days and we hit 10 different lakes, from Lake Superior to, the Winnie area, all over. We hit a bunch of different lakes where we fished 10 different species. We're going to do the same thing this year. I told Randin before you jumped on, he said there's 1,048 lakes in Ottertail County. I'm like, I think I fished about 8 or 9 of them. So I think this year we're going to plan on doing it somewhere over in this area, at least part of our trip, and hit a few more lakes in Ottertail County, just because it is such a special area. I like this area. For me, living over where I live and going up to Winnie and Leech all the time, you kind of get in that routine, just like you were saying. People vacationing fall into that routine where they're always going to fish Ottertail, or they're always going to fish Big Pine or Rush or whatever the case may, West Battle. I highly encourage listeners to get out and explore new lakes. It truly is one of the funnest things when it comes to angling, and it is truly rewarding when you do it on your own, not based on other people giving you information about the lake, but just going out in the morning as the sun's coming up with a cup of coffee and just starting to sort of breaking down a lake. It's really fun. It's one of my favorite things to do of all time.
Yeah, you go out and do what you know how to do. We've all got our little different nuances maybe in how we approach a new lake, but we all have our way of being successful too. So you just go out there and you pick a new one. And now that I've got a little more time on my hands, we've always talked about taking a map of Ottertail County and fishing a different lake every week and just start putting pins on them and see how many of them we can get done.
Can actually get to. Yeah. You have weather, you have life, you have family that sort of gets in the way. You think, oh, I could do that pretty easily, but you start breaking it down day to day and how much actual time you have, let's say in the summer versus winter to fish. And, that would be quite the challenge. That would be sort of a cool thing. I mean, I could definitely get my arms around doing something like that. But it obviously would be, you'd have to be a full on, like, that's what you're going to do. And you're going to spend, it would be interesting to see how many years it would take to do that.
Yeah, it would. And it's on my bucket list. I think I'm really going to try it. I maybe even get started here this summer on it. And now that I'm retired and have a little more free time, I just think it'd be a real neat challenge and a cool way to explore all the other lakes. Like I said earlier, we sometimes get hung up on coming to the big lakes, the big name lakes here, but there's some tremendous fishing in these other lakes here too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Phil, thank you so much for being on the podcast. If people want to get a hold of you as far as guiding, how can they do so?
Probably easiest, go to our website, which is ptsguideservice.com.
Thank you so much, buddy. Hey, I look forward to fishing Ottertail, spending some time with you, going out to dinner, fishing Lundmania. We're going to have more from Dialed In Angling Podcast after this. OnX Fish is the best tool I have ever used for finding new lakes to target. Quickly filter lakes by species, then select trophy potential, high abundance, keeper potential, or high stocking effort to find the fish you are after in the size and the numbers you are trying to catch. Download from the App Store today to get research tools for the serious anglers and beginners alike, giving you the data to target the right lakes and the confidence to get there. Use tools like recent imagery, fishing hotspot data, or the best-in-class weather features that call out current wind, weather, barometer, moon phase, majors and minors, along with precip and more. OnX Fish is a phenomenal tool both on and off the water for discovering new fishing opportunities, many of which you'd never known existed. Download OnX Fish Midwest today, the app that is changing the game on ice and open water. Okay, for the final segment of this week's installment of the Dialed In Angling Podcast, we're going to talk a little bit about Lundmania. Lundmania is a Lund Owners Tournament. It's on Ottertail Lake. Like I said, if you listen back to the podcast that I did with Al last year at this time, I believe it's labeled Lundmania. If you want to archive it, they decided to do a tournament that was a Lund Owners Tournament to kind of celebrate the area, celebrate New York Mills. The cool part about this tournament is it's really laid back. It's really fun. A lot of the anglers that fish it year after year after year. When you're at the rules meeting, people raise their hand. How many people have fished this tournament since the start? There's an overwhelming amount of the crowd that has. And it's really cool because everyone owns a Lund boat in the tournament. A lot of people are from the area, and they feed you like kings at the rules meeting. And then the top 10 teams get to be in the parade in New York Mills just following the tournament. So it's really neat. There's kids out there. You're throwing candy. I know in the past we've been in the parade several times. I've only fished it a couple times. With me I am joined by Bill Dietz, Tim Sandy, this is his first time fishing Lundmania. And then, of course, Robbie Roach was my tournament partner. My son, no stranger to the podcast, Bill Dietz, has been on the show, Dialed In Angling, and has been on the podcast as well. we're all sitting here. We've been tying up lines, sharing knots, sharing information. That's the fun part about Lundmania is coming out to Ottertail. We get to fish together. We're going to Zorba's. It sounds like Robbie's buying us tacos. But hey, welcome to the podcast, guys. How pumped are you to be at Lundmania?
We're really excited. This is the second year that I've fished it. It's my 6th year pre-fishing it. So it's been a lot of fun. And, to be a part of something like that is truly an honor, because you think of the Lund brand and the Lund heritage, and it's just like when you go to the event and you just see a lot of the people that are just diehard Lund fans. It's great to be a part of that mix.
Being in the parade, I remember driving my boat down the first time in the Lund parade. The first year we fished it, I fished it with Phil Jensen. We got 9th or 10th in the tournament. We're in the parade. We're going down, and a guy pointed out in the crowd. He's like, "Hey, I built that boat." And it was really neat. It was like, wow, okay, here's some extra candy, But the funny part is Robbie and I ran out of candy 2 years ago. So we're throwing out plastics. We were throwing out Crush City plastics. Anything in the boat, because we're literally out of candy. So we're throwing it out. But it was really neat being in New York Mills, where Lund boats are made, driving through the town and just seeing that whole crowd. And it's a fun atmosphere, a fun deal. If there's anyone listening to this that would love to get in a tournament or fish a tournament with their kid or their friend, I know you and Sandman are high school buddies, and you hunt together, you fish together. This is the type of tournament you want to get in.
Yeah, I'm super pumped that Bill invited me this year. It's my first tournament I've ever been in, so I'm excited. It's only one day, so we'll just see how it goes. I got good leadership from Bill, though. He's dialed in on so much stuff with tackle and equipment, and I'm just pumped to see what happens on Friday.
So did he hit you with the spreadsheets? Because he's been talking spreadsheet. To the listeners behind the scenes, Bill Dietz has been pre-fishing with Robbie and I and Phil and I for a number of years for Lundmania. And Bill has always systematically done a bunch of map work on his gear, his tackle. And now this year I heard he's added Excel spreadsheets. So that's going next level Lundmania stuff. Robbie and I just worry about what kind of breakfast sandwich we're getting at Cars and making sure we have enough gas in the boat. Rob, are you pumped to be back at Lundmania? I know we don't get Robbie and I fish a lot together as a father and son. But this summer with graduation, other than being up at Lake Winnipeg in the boat with Jack Dietz, we really haven't fished together a whole lot.
Yeah, I'm super excited to be here. I look forward to this every year. Once 4th of July is over, all I can think about is going walleye fishing. I've pre-fished with you guys forever now, and this is going to be my 3rd year fishing the tournament. So I can't wait to get back out there and catch more fish.
Well, I would love to share a whole bunch of fishing information. Maybe after the tournament, we'll see how things shake out for us. The cool part about Ottertail is there's just so many different ways to fish. Randin alluded to that in the beginning of the podcast. You can fish so many different ways. You can fish spinners, you can fish crawlers, you can fish live bait, you can fish plastics, you can snap jig, jigging wraps, you can cast jerk baits, you can do a lot of different things on Ottertail to catch them. I know just being around the area picking up bait, I've talked to some people that are like, I'm going to troll lead core the whole time. I'm going to only troll spinners. I'm going to only live bait rig. I'm going to only pull chubs. We've heard the onlys so many different times. And then it seems like after Lundmania is over, it's amazing how different people fish out here. It's a really diverse fishery. I can say one thing. I have seen so many walleyes in my live scope that there are a lot of fish for years to come. These year classes in Ottertail Lake right now are insane. The amount of fish between 13 and 15 inches is off the charts good, which is great to see. You hear so many people that complain about live scopers and live scoping is going to kill everything. To see your year classes like this in a lake like Ottertail, I think things are in good shape for a long period of time.
Well, I think too, the amount of bait that we saw in the system, just clouds of minnows and it's like you said, it's just going to continue to feed the entire food chain there. But it's a great lake, and it's been consistent, so it's been fun to fish.
Well, I'm super pumped to fish with all you guys. I'm super pumped that in about 5 minutes we're heading to Zorba's and Robbie is buying us tacos. He promised. But we're going to have a fun time. We get to share a ton of time in the boat. We get to share stories and hang out. That's what fishing is all about, camaraderie. And of course, the Ottertail area is one of those special places on the planet where you can enjoy summer, come out here, catch a whole bunch of fish, and have a good time doing it. If anybody listening has ever thought about fishing a tournament, Lundmania is one of those tournaments that you got to do. It's just, you grab your kid, grab your Lund boat, come and fish for a couple days, and you're going to meet a ton of people. I can't wait to go to the rules meeting tomorrow night, you guys. It's always like old home week. Like you see so many people that you bump into from, and a lot of just legendary names and people from all over the planet. You got Ray's Marine right down the road. Every boat on the lake is wrapped in Ray's Marine. You got the Sutter Homes. You got all these just incredible names in fishing that are kind of iconic to this area. We had Randin Olson on, Phil. We were talking to Todd. We were over in New York Mills talking to Scotty, getting some bait from him. So it's just really fun to be over here and hanging out with everybody. I look forward to Lundmania. We'll let you know on the next podcast how things shake out for Team Sandy and Dietz. And then, of course, Roach and Roach, we're back. We'll see who catches the big ones. I usually out Robbie on the big ones, but I think this year might be your year, bud.
Yeah, hopefully.
Rob's stepping up his game this year. He's trying a few different techniques. It was like an art project last night, doing some things with jigs and tinkering with things. So we'll let you know how things shake out, but I'm happy to be in the Ottertail area. Just pumped to be fishing with my son and a bunch of good buddies. So hopefully this podcast gets you pumped about the Ottertail area. And as always, I'm Tony Roach, and this has been the Dialed In Angling Podcast.